Good evening, folks. Tonight's discussion C is about Idaho's disabled and the governor wanting to cut Medicaid funding for them for services. So we will dig into that for C. Please join me for presentation C tonight. So here we go. The piece reports that families of people with disabilities are mobilizing in Idaho after the governor proposed 22 million in Medicaid cuts that would target optional home and community-based services, or HCBS, such as in-home caregiving, private duty nursing, and 24/7 supported living staffing. It uses personal stories from Idaho families to show how these cuts could immediately threaten independent living, paid family caregiving, income, and medically necessary nursing supports. What the Idaho examples show: personal stakes. The article profiles several families whose daily lives depend on HCBS. A 39-year-old with cerebral palsy in supported living, a 26-year-old with severe brain damage cared for at home, and a 19-year-old receiving private duty nursing while on hospice. These stories illustrate how fragile the balance is between living safely at home and being forced into institutional care. Each example underscores that HCBS are not extras, but the infrastructure that makes daily life possible. Economic ripple effects. One family's income relies on a Medicaid program that pays a parent to provide one-on-one care. Cutting that pay would destabilize the household, threatening their ability to maintain housing, transportation, and continuity of care. The article makes clear that HCBS cuts don't just affect the disabled individual, they reverberate through entire family systems. Workforce fragility. Supported living agencies already struggle with low wages and high turnover. Further cuts would likely push workers out of the field, shrink provider capacity, or close programs entirely. The article suggests that even small reductions can collapse an already strained workforce, leaving families with no backup options. Broader policy and budget contexts. federal law changes, and state budgets. The article connects Idaho's proposal to a recent federal law expected to reduce Medicaid spending nationally. States like Idaho, which align their tax codes with federal changes, face automatic revenue losses. This creates pressure to cut state Medicaid budgets, even as demand for services grows. Why HCBS are targeted? HCBS are technically optional under Medicaid, unlike nursing home care, which states must cover. This optional status makes HCBS politically vulnerable despite being cost effective and widely preferred. The article highlights the paradox. The services that keep people out of institutions are the easiest to cut. Legal and rights implications highlighted. The article references the 1999 Olmstead Supreme Court decision, which requires states to provide services in the most integrated setting appropriate. It also notes a Justice Department review finding that Idaho had previously segregated disabled adults unnecessarily in nursing homes. This creates a legal tension. States can cut optional HCBS, but doing so may violate civil rights obligations. If people are forced into institutions because community supports disappear, the article frames this as both a budget issue and a rights issue. How families and advocates are responding. Public mobilization for a 4-hour town hall in Idaho drew more than 500 people, an unusually large turnout for a budget hearing. Families shared emotional testimony about what losing services would mean. Institutionalization, medical decline, or the collapse of family caregiving arrangements. Advocacy framing. Disability rights groups argue that cutting HCBS is a false economy. Institutional care is far more expensive, and states risk federal scrutiny or lawsuits. If cuts lead to segregation, The article also notes that in other states, such as Colorado and Missouri, similar advocacy has already influenced lawmakers to pause or reconsider cuts. Key takeaways and implications. Immediate human risk. The proposed cuts threaten independence, safety, and even survival for people who rely on continuous or specialized in-home care. Policy trade-off. Short-term savings from timing optional services or trimming optional services can produce long-term cuts or costs. Financial, legal, and human if people are pushed into institutions. Political leverage. The article shows that families' voices matter. Public testimony, organized advocacy, and media attention have already shifted policy decisions in other states and could do so in Idaho. Okay, second half of C, guys, is people with disabilities. Explain how Medicaid cuts could impact their lives. Signals a first person, human centered reports. The page collects direct testimony showing how proposed Medicaid reductions would immediately disrupt daily routines, healthcare, work, and community participation for people with disabilities. People who rely on Medicaid funded supports. The emphasis on lived experience rather than abstract budget math. The story uses concrete examples to translate policy changes into everyday consequences. What the surrounding page content makes clear about the stakes. Medicaid as daily infrastructure. The page frames Medicaid not as optional charity, but as the system that pays for wheelchairs, personal attendants, therapists, transportation, and care. Coordination that enable people to live, work, and to participate in community life. Home and community supports are fragile. It highlights that many of these services at risk are home and community-based services, HCBS, which states can treat as optional and therefore cut first when budgets tighten. Cuts are existential, not incremental. Testimonies show that losing a single service, a nurse attendant hours, or transportation can cascade into medical decline. Job loss, or forced institutionalization. Administrative barriers matter. The page also notes that policy changes that add paperwork or eligibility hurdles can cause people to lose coverage even if they remain eligible, compounding harm. Typical examples the page uses to make the point concrete: mobility and personal care. People describe Medicaid paying for attendance and equipment. Without them, they cannot perform basic activities like dressing, bathing, or leaving the house. Medical and therapeutic community. Parents and adults explain how Medicaid funded therapies and nursing keep chronic conditions stable. Interruptions erase process and increase emergency care risk. Okay, guys, that's your C for tonight. I will see everybody tomorrow for shows or later after dinner. For now, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.